Welcome to the Modern CPA Success Show, where we're 100% focused on helping accounting firms achieve success. If you're an accounting firm owner who wants to learn how to provide virtual CFO services, then this podcast is for you.
Welcome to episode 2 of the Modern CPA Success Show. I'm your host, Jamie Na, the Director of Accounting at Summit CPA. Today, I'm joined by Jody Grunden and Adam Hale, the two partners at Summit CPA. In last week's episode, we discussed the start of Summit CPA and how we went down the CPA path. Today, we're going to talk about the distributed model. So before we get started, let's go into the basics of distributed model and the terms that are used. Adam, can you go into that for us a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it gets called a lot. So I think the most widely used term is remote employees. We hear that a lot. I mean, back in the day, you'd hear telecommuting. Both kind of mean the same thing. It's a little bit of semantics in terms of also using the terms distributed. But telecommuting is just meaning that you're phoning in, or these days you're video conferencing into the office. Remote employees, same thing. So early on in Summit CPA, we had remote employees. So people that would work from home for a day a week, or we even had people that moved away, and they were true remote employees at that point because we had a brick and mortar office and then they lived in another state. So they were remote employees. The term distributed was introduced to us whenever we went to a conference that was, focused on companies that didn't have an office. And that's really where we learned that and started using the term distributed, because whenever we got rid of our physical brick and mortar in terms of the entire team coming there, that's whenever we went distributed as opposed to remote.
Great. And so Summit, you said, is a distributed model. And so a lot of CPA firms will do the remote or have someone work from home 1 or 2 days a week, but we are a true distributed model. So that's just to clear that up. And so any other types of remote work that's out there?
Yeah, to kind of add to that, we work virtually with our clients. So virtual is another term that's often used, and virtual meaning that we're using technology to work with clients, kind of like we're doing right today, or through a GoToMeeting or a webinar or a Zoom meeting, that type of thing. So using technology to actually meet with a client versus a face-to-face handshake, type meeting. So I see virtual used a lot. Clients
are super bummed because they think that it means hologram and we're going to be there. And it's like, no, we just mean Zoom or GoToMeeting. So that's not happening.
Okay, great. So just that's clear now, I think. So let's go into a little bit about how Summit became distributed and kind of the story behind that. So Jody, I know you have a pretty good story there. So if you want to jump into that story.
Yeah, sure. The story was that we were looking into it back in 2011. We had a client that we brought on that was a distributed company. At that time, distributed, there was maybe 25 companies across the U.S. that were distributed. So not many at all. Again, not having an office. And they started without having an office. So it was kind of a cool thing. We learned a lot from them over a period of 2 years. Before we actually made that jump, we learned what went right, what went wrong, what to do, what not to do, that type of thing. And then we decided to venture off a little bit with it. We had our first employee worked remotely, moved out of the office, and actually moved to a state far, far away. And with that, we're like, well, how are we going to make this work? And so we thought, well, let's toy with this little idea a little bit. And so we went to a conference with distributed companies. And like they said, there's probably 20 or 30 companies there from all different types of companies, from a kickball company to design and dev shops to all these different types of companies. And we thought, this could be something we really want to do. However, we didn't have really a lot of buy-in. The accounting team, who really loves change. When I brought this back to them, they're like, no way, we're not going that direction at all. We can't be distributed. We can't work remotely. How are we going to collaborate? What about the clients, meeting them face to face? That's so important in what we do. And then I had to kind of remind them, well, that's kind of what we do with our clients. We're virtual with our clients. We don't meet with them. So why would they, what are the different issues or different aches and pains they might have? And it was just more of a change situation. They just didn't really want to change, because again, the accountant personality does not want to change. They love to do the exact same thing, type of a.
He doesn't look like he's looking at me, but what he really means is Adam didn't want to work from home.
Yeah.
And I have a bunch of kids and I didn't want to work from home, and it was a different deal. So, I mean, like Jody mentioned, working with clients virtually, like it felt natural, and it was something that we, it took a little bit getting behind the camera and looking at the camera and doing those kind of things and learning camera etiquette, which is a totally different podcast, but we probably have some blooper reels on that one. But, whenever you're looking at it, it's like, working from home was like, for me, whenever I'd work remote, it just felt super unnatural. Like I wasn't nested, meaning my machines weren't set up properly. I was working off of a kitchen table, just different things like that. So it didn't feel comfortable. But one day that all changed, right, Jody? Whenever we had to.
Yeah, because we decided, because we're at the point with our building, because I own the building, and so we're at the point in the building where we had to either expand the building so that we could, eventually grow into it. Because at that time we had 18 employees, and the building was really only good for maybe 20 employees tops. It wasn't. It needed some remodeling, so we decided to go ahead and remodel, because I think there was only one or two people that decided, hey, I'd love to work remotely. Everybody else was like, absolutely no way, and so we put $100,000 in the building. So we put $100,000 in the building, kicked everybody out for, initially it was 4 weeks. 4 weeks turned into 6 weeks, and 6 weeks maybe turned into about 8 weeks that were actually truly outside of this office, because we gutted the entire thing, took all the walls, everything out, and really made it a really cool office. We put this really cool fish tank right out in the front lobby there, a bunch of saltwater fish. It was really neat, kind of dividing my office in there. Adam had a really nice corner office in the back. We made a really cool conference room. We put these really nice, we went from really small cubicles to put really nice cubicles. We put offices with TVs in it. It was really, really cool. We were pretty excited about it. And throughout that construction period, I stayed in the office and with all the hammering and everything, and answered the door when people are coming in, thinking, what's going on with this accounting firm? And so eventually it got to a point where the office was really neat. I hadn't yet put the sign out front on the building yet. We thought we'll do that the very last thing, and started asking everybody to come back. And Adam?
We didn't come back. So we nested, and we didn't want to leave the nest. So it became like, I think that what it was for me was finding a defined space. And we talk about this a lot, being distributed in order to be kind of successful. It's about that divide, because people are often worried about, how do I separate work from home? And for us, it's simple, get a door. So I know a lot of big companies talk about that as well, but that's really helped me. I have a defined space. I was able to set everything up that I had at the work and now at home. And I mean, the commute is killer. I got to walk from the bedroom to the office.
Don't forget about the cup of coffee. You got to go to the kitchen first.
Yeah, I got to occasionally. It's just so nice. I mean, you just and it's not hard for me to shut it off. I mean, the second I walk through those doors, I don't know about you two, but I mean, we've talked about this before, and we talk about it with our team a lot. But once you shut those doors, I don't really have any no more than I do already looking at my phone for other things,
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, it creates that big. I think it's a must. It's a requirement. You got to have that divide, like Adam's saying. If you're just working on the kitchen table the entire time, I just don't see that working long term for anybody. I mean, I really don't. I mean, short term, yeah, you can do it for a month. You can do it for a few weeks. For a year, that would be really, really tough. You got to have the wall in office, I think, in order for it to really work really well. But everybody figured it out. Everybody came back and said, hey, this is a lot easier than I thought. They figured out all their issues. Internet was a big issue for a lot of people. They upgraded, and some people they couldn't, so those people had to stay back at this really cool office I built for 30 people that has now, 4 people in it. was really tough.
Yeah. I mean, and there's a lot that goes into that. And I mean, not everybody has a golf course behind their house like I do, so it's it's one of those things where you have to be super careful. It's a total mind shift, because like you said, internet was huge. Everybody's like, oh, my internet's great. And then it's like, yeah, but it doesn't support video streaming all day long. So you sound like a robot. You're cutting in and out. That was a big thing. Like I said, making sure that your background was clean. You don't want to a a full view of your living room and your laundry sitting over in the corner. You only have to dress up from the neck up, which is super awesome. So,
unless you have to get up, of course.
Yeah. Then you just better be careful.
There's stories about that too, right?
Yeah, there's plenty of stories about that. In the wintertime, my wife calls them my give up pants. And so I'm always like walking around in sweats and like a nice shirt or whatever. And it's just like, so that takes a little bit. But I think the other thing that's important to mention is like that transition period. So there was a time, like right whenever we built the office, like Jody said, I had this nice corner office. So I went in there for a little while, and we did have some teammates that were still there. So we had a handful of people that were, and it created this weird cultural divide because what we also started doing that we never did before, which is a huge advantage of working distributed, is we were able to open up hiring throughout the entire United States. So we started hiring people outside of our area, but we still had a good concentration of people that lived in the area that would come to the office. So there was this thing, and our first remote employee actually called our attention to it the most, but it seemed like there was this big cultural divide where we communicated like this all the time with them. But then internally, you'd shift into the conference room or you'd go out and talk to people. So that was a little bit of a thing. And how we solved for that while we were kind of in that transition phase is, Jody hooked us up with a software that we still use for our virtual office right now, which is called Sococo, which is amazing. I don't know how really we would do it without it, but we shifted all of our meetings to that. So even though somebody's right outside my door, 10 feet away, I said, nope. If you want to talk, like jump in the virtual office. That way everybody can see that you're in my office and we're communicating the same way that I would with anybody else. And it really helped the transition and eventually push some of those people that were staying in the office. They're like, well, hell, I guess I might as well go home.
So, they did. They quit coming in because of that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've talked to a lot of companies about this, and I think the mixed offices are the most difficult. The companies that are all in one office are a little bit easier. The ones that are distributed are a little more complicated, but once they get it figured out, it works really well. It's those mixed offices. Like everybody's been on that conference call where 3 people are in a room and you're sitting there on the phone and you're just like multitasking because no one even knows you're there. And so those are the more difficult situations, I think, from my experience, for sure.
Well, we find out with our clients as well, because again, we work virtually with the clients. So the ideal scenario is for the client not to all be in one conference room when we're talking to them, but to actually be behind their own computer, and then you don't get those side talks where it's so distracting, or, everybody has an opportunity to talk when talked to and they're paying attention. So yeah, working virtually with clients is the same thing, I think, working with, in a distributed environment with the team. But, once we forced everybody to work inside Sococo, like Adam said, it made it night and day different. Everybody communicated in the same manner, shared screens in the same manner. They got used to it. There was never these side conversations. And like Adam said, the team just eventually, I think there was like 6 maybe at that time. So a third of our office stayed home. And after that, I would say maybe 2 or 3 people, are in technically the office. We have 3 people in the office right now, and one's because they live with their mother, and then another one just decided they wanted to come in for whatever reason. But we never technically kicked everybody out, but they all communicate again in the exact same way. So the cool thing about that is that we remodeled the building for 30 people. And we thought, hey, 30 people, 10 years from now, we'll probably need to expand. That was bad forecasting on our part. It was like 3 years later, we have more than 30 people. Now it's 5 years later, we're pushing, we'll be pushing 50 people here within the next probably year. So that model or that thinking that, hey, this brick and mortar thing was going to be a great thing would really have stifled our growth. It would not enabled us to grow the speed that we were, not only for the size of the building, but like Adam was saying earlier, the quality of the people. It's pretty amazing when you can get, 2,000 plus resumes coming in of really super quality people because of the type of environment you work in. So it puts us up, basically competing with the big boys in that regard, to the type of people that we can attract for these positions, which is really cool.
And Sococo, it's a little basic, but and it is, at first glance, it looks a little voyeuristic because you can kind of see where everybody is. But I can tell you also, working distributed from an efficiency standpoint, what would happen in the office is people would helicopter. So my door would be shut and they'd want to talk to me, and they just helicopter around the office, get up, a half hour later, see if my door's still shut. People would be waiting in line, that kind of thing. Well, sometimes maybe I'm on a call and I just didn't forget, I forgot to open my door. And so, but people didn't want to disturb me, that kind of a thing. Inside of Sococo, the cool thing is people can tell whenever I'm in a meeting or not in a meeting, and it's really easy. You still get the, you still get the water cooler talk. Like when somebody comes into my office, we shoot the breeze for the first few minutes anyway, but you don't get all the lingering and then whenever you do have to be collaborative and work together, instead of something being on your machine and something being on my machine, we got to walk back and forth. It's like you can pull up your screen, I can pull up my screen, and then we can call somebody else in and they can pull up their monitor, and we're looking at all three things all in the same room. And it just makes it super, super convenient and very collaborative.
Oh. Yeah, I would say much more collaborative than actually being in person, because it's not very often you can have three people looking at three different things at the same time when you're in person. I just don't see that happening very often. It's more like, hey, do this, and come back later. It's like, no, let's do it right now, and you visually see everything.
Yeah, you just have to use Excel instead of a whiteboard for T accounts
and
all that good stuff. Just pull up my Excel spreadsheet and be like, all right, here's the journal entries.
They got cool tools. Jody uses it all the time. You can draw right on the screen if you want to. If that's your thing. That's the thing is there's still, people worry about culture, and that's not been a problem for us. In fact, there's trade-offs, don't get me wrong. And that's why we do a team retreat. That's one of the other things that we kind of, lead into in order to create that culture. But I think the team does a great job of like giving each other kudos. We have a core values channel where we talk about, we're always trying to live out our core values anytime we do anything. And so when we see somebody on the team doing something that kind of supports one of those, we have a channel inside of Slack that's also integrates with our Sococo. And we just shout out at that person and let them know, hey, you did a great job, that kind of a thing. So it really, you probably get a little bit more praise, being distributed, because you have to be so deliberate with your communication.
Yeah, there's less bumping into, and that's the thing I noticed. Like you have those social conversations, but a lot of times they're more intentional. Like I'm just gonna hop in Jody's office and ask him about his trip was and stuff like that. It's not like oops, I accidentally bumped into Jody while I was getting lunch and we're gonna talk for 45 minutes about something. So you definitely have to be more intentional about it. But you mentioned Slack, you mentioned Sococo. Any other tools or things that really helped change the way Summit did things for a distributed model?
Well, it's kind of funny because you never mentioned the telephone.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't use the telephone a whole lot. I would say maybe 5 to 10% of our communication would be by the telephone, tops. Would you?
Yeah, mine's not even close to that. So I have a soft phone, and it probably rings a couple times a month, and they're always like garbage. Everybody's usually either slacking or they're emailing, and then we do a ton of video conferencing. So, and that's even way better. If we weren't virtual, we would probably be on the telephone talking to our clients a lot more than we would be, like whenever you're not having those in-person meetings, you'd probably be more on the telephone than you would be in video conferencing. And I think video conferencing is just as powerful as being in front of somebody, because you can see what they're doing and thinking. And so anyway,
it's the eye contact, right? You can see the eye contact and whether they really understand what you're saying or not. And finance and accounting is not an easy thing for everybody to understand. And so it's real important to have that visual contact there. And the cool thing to add to it is when we meet with our clients for the first time ever, it's kind of funny because sometimes we'll have a client for, a year, 2 years and never have met them personally ever. And we're their go-to finance person, which is kind of fun, kind of funny, kind of fun. And for a lot of people think, well, how the heck could they ever do that? And it's through the video conferencing. It's through the eye contact, the visual, being able to see people all the time. And then when we do meet with them, through like maybe a company or treat where they invite us to come out, hang out with them for a week, it's not awkward because the person really well. Their family, their eyesight, what they look like. The only thing you don't know is how tall they are.
Right.
And that's on Jody's 6'4", in case you're wondering.
Yeah.
I'm like 4'11". So that's the thing is everybody's always just like, dang, I didn't realize you're that tall or that short or whatever. But And how important is video to Jody? Like Jody is like one of the most passive people. Like he avoids confrontation at all costs. Like that's how he is. And I just remember one day because he like flipped the crew out because we were kind of like trying to figure out, this was whenever we were we were still in the office, but we were embracing the virtual concept with our clients. And like Jody said, it's the presence. It's like the eye contact and making sure you understand. It's super important. Half the team, because we're accountants, we were a little like late adopters there in terms of trying to do that. And I just remember coming into the office one morning and Jody had like everybody's camera that didn't have theirs on their chair and said, "Hey, if you plan on working here tomorrow, this better be connected." Like, everybody's like, "Whoa, that came from Adam." Sure, like, he threatens me on a regular basis. So it's
I've heard him
wild.
do the same thing with potential clients. You're going on a meeting to talk to a new client, and the first thing Jody says is, "What? Are you afraid of showing your camera?" It's like, he'll call out potential clients. So it's a big deal, and I get it because, again, when I went to my first company retreat, I feel like I knew everybody. There was no like breaking the ice. You walked right in. You were doing hugs. You started drinking beers with people right away. There was no like awkward period just because we're so used to seeing each other on camera. So I totally get why Jody's passionate about that.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because I was being interviewed at the time, and the big thing was I thought people were already using their cameras, and unbeknownst to me, they weren't using their cameras only with me. And then they'd be like, "Oh, my camera is not working today," or whatever. It's like, well, whatever. But at that time, I was like, "Okay, fine, your camera's not working today. I don't talk to you very often." Then the next time I talk to him, "My camera's not working today." It's like, "Okay, when do you get that camera fixed?" "Oh, I'll get it fixed." But it was one of those things that I got interviewed, and I was through a video or through I was being interviewed, and I was like just proud about how everybody's on camera and everything. And so I was going one by one to everybody in the office just to show this person how great everybody was, and nobody's camera was working. I went through 10 people. It was really comical, and I was kind of getting pretty upset. And that's when I told them, say, "Hey, don't come in tomorrow unless you got camera working." and it was amazing. Everybody had their camera working.
Magically, everybody's camera worked.
Yeah, it was kind of like, wow, they fixed it
a while
for some reason
to learn how to look into it, but
yeah. That's right, exactly.
Why you're on camera and the mic.
Oh, and it still burns me every once in a while. I'll see people that are not on camera. I'll just pop in and say, "Hey, what's going on with the cameras?" And like, oh, boom, they pop on. Oh, yeah, okay, well, great. So accountants would probably be the least of any probably profession to embrace being on a camera, but we definitely do for sure. It's a requirement. It's really a must. And when we interview people, if they can't get their camera to work, that's not a good sign that they're going to be a good employee, with our company. And the same thing with prospects. When I make fun of prospects when they come on, because if they're not going to be willing to get on a camera conference with us here, they're probably not going to be a good prospect for us. Somebody that's not going to really work well. Because again, telephone is pretty antiquated, nowadays, which is kind of funny. But the way we work, it just does not work well by just being on a phone. It'd be very, very few opportunities would I think it would ever succeed by just a phone call all the time.
Great. Well, I think I know this area will go into a lot of other topics we're going to cover in future podcasts. So, for example, hiring is really important. I think people have to have the right personality. And then also our meeting structure. I think our meeting structure has changed and evolved because of our being distributed. But I think we'll save those for future podcasts. And I think unless you guys have anything else to add, we will end this podcast. Anything we missed, Adam? Jody?
Yeah, the only thing that I think that is important to mention is even though we don't have a physical office, there's still a cost associated with that. So some of the things that we do is we have a tech stipend that we give so we give them a prepaid PEX card. It's like we load a couple $100 a month on there for them, and they can buy monitors, and they're responsible for keeping up with their technology if they want a printer, a different chair, standing desk, those kind of things. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing we do. We also, because we're not in the office, we do internal education, CPE for us, but we also give them an education stipend card. So that's another spiff that they kind of get, that they self-manage and regulate. And then on the facility side as well is the team retreat. Team retreat's pretty expensive, super important. Typically on the low ends, like $1,500 per person. It can be as high as like $2,500 per person. But it is important to still get that like physical presence at least once a year. Although we really push people on the education stipend to break into small groups. And instead of spending a ton of money on an online class, save your money, get cheap CPE, and then spend the rest of that education stipend on travel and connect somewhere cool like Vegas or, Miami or somewhere where they're having a CPA event and you can hang out for a couple of days with people on your team. So that's, I think, super important.
Yeah, that's huge. And it's kind of amazing when we go to these things, because I've been to many different retreats, at different companies I'd worked with prior to. And it's like, everybody is excited to be around each other, but really couldn't wait to leave the retreat to do their own thing. It's like, oh, I can't wait till 4:00 to hit so that I can buzz out of here and then, do whatever, by myself or with my spouse or whatever. And it's amazing that when we have these retreats, that's not the case. People don't want to leave each other. They get done with the retreat part of it, and they want to hang out with each other till 2-3 o'clock in the morning if they can, because they don't get a chance to ever see each other in person. So they just want to take advantage of it, and it's kind of an amazing. It's really hard to believe, but it's amazing to see people wanting to be around each other so much. And I think that just simply goes to the culture that we've developed within the firm. How strong of a culture it really is. And I really truly don't think it would be as strong if it was a brick and mortar office. I don't. I think you'd have more divisions. I think you'd have more issues being distributed. We find that's just the opposite, which is pretty good testimony of the team that we have.
When they come back from the team retreat, just the momentum that they come back with and the comfort level with one another in terms of one of our core values is collaboration. Like, we just see a huge spike in that because they're all super comfortable with one another, and they, people that normally might not have talked to one another are now connecting, and so it's really cool. And you see them start to, you're like, oh wow, those three are going on a CPE event together. It's like, didn't even know they talked to each other, but they connected at the team retreat and kind of built around that. So anyway, those are super, super important to a distributed culture, I think.
And I agree a lot with a lot of that. I think the trainings are really important. I mean, that's a thing where you get to see who you're going with, and then, Jody and I, let's go to an LA training and get CPE together and hang out. And so you get those opportunities, and to have that opportunity is amazing. But also on the less side, like even just the amount for technology, like how many times have you worked in a big office? You're like, I'd love to have a standing desk, but you can't really ask for it. Where here it's like, oh, I have the money for it, I'm going to buy a standing desk. They give me money to do things like that. So it's like you have the freedom to make your office look like and feel like whatever you want, and they give you the money to do that. So I think that huge helps the working environment because everybody feels very comfortable. So I think that's definitely two very positive things that you brought up there.
Cool.
Great. Well, definitely want to thank you guys for joining us today. And I think it was a good conversation. And the next episode, we're going to talk more about hiring, definitely for the distributed model. So I appreciate you guys. And thanks for coming in.
You bet.
Thanks.
Enjoy this episode? Visit our website at summitcpa.net to get more tips and strategies for achieving modern CPA firm success. We're here to be a resource in this ever-changing industry.